And so basically, we're going to make a couple of adjustments today since Alex is not around. What we would like to do is have the three of us share stories just quickly, but talk a little more about how we did it. So we've talked amongst each other and we've prepared ahead of time. And we've made sure that we have some commonalities and some differences with what we've done. And given that Alex will be out, what we want to do is spend Alex's portion more as a sharing and Q&A, or an additional, make it an additional segment in terms of Q&A and sharing. So would that be okay with everyone? Okay. So our first speaker for the day would be... Yes, sir? I need to bring it up? Oh, anyway. The other guy. Okay, sorry. I always think it's me, right? The name of this workshop is... Yes. Engaging collaboration between church and government. So that is something that the three of us have been working on for a bit. And basically, to give you a background, it's what we've experienced is that it's difficult to get the church and the government to work together. Yeah. So it is not unique. It can be a very painful experience. And we've also, once you finally get them to work together, you realize, oh my gosh, this is not sustainable. Right? But we have somehow, by God's grace and wisdom, found some ways to go about that. And with me, for example, today, I will give you one small example and one big example. And then Brian specifically he's a master of networking, actually. He's from Viva. He's the director of networking from Viva. They have a project in Kampala, Africa, that I've asked Brian to talk a little more about. So before I ruin everything, Brian, may I ask you to come up? And can we please welcome him with a warm applause?
Okay, well, it's good to have this opportunity. Not yet. I don't know if we can just close this off because it's a bit of a distraction for everybody. My name's Brian Wilkinson. I am based in Oxford in the UK, but Viva has been around for 20 odd years, and it is geared, its focus is on children at risk, but it's geared to empowering the local church to connect together in networks in order that together we can have a bigger impact on the situation of children in that city. And we work in 38 networks in 26 countries dotted around, and most of them have been going for a good nearly 20 years. So it's that kind of background that I come. Now, one of the benefits of connecting together, and we're obviously looking at this whole, how is the church? And when we use the church, what does that mean? Well, for us, the whole reason we network is that we want to kind of raise up the Christian response. And that's not just individual churches. Well, it is individual churches, but it's also the way in which together we have an identity, whether we know it or not. We are the church, as in a bigger body, whether we act like it or not. And part of our, I guess, the reason we do what we do is because we want to see that impact of the body, the church, being much greater than it is in its individual forms. And one of the benefits we have, clearly, is that if you manage to get that connectivity, you have a much better representative power. And so in most of our networks, we have over 100 churches and Christian organizations within a city. An average is about 120 if we work the numbers. So that's a good group of people to go and have influence together. And it's not just the government, but it can be all sorts of different authorities and different levels of authorities. And one of the things that we're particularly, I think, is maybe different about our model is that we work bottom up. A lot of INGOs, they kind of work at the kind of advocacy, political kind of level, whereas we really work from the bottom up. We work with some of the smallest churches and some of the smallest organisations because it's those guys who are doing amazing things in their local community, but in many respects they are almost invisible, and the authorities don't even know they're there in many cases. And yet they're the precious... Patrick MacDonald, who founded Viva, used to call them the saints in the slums. They are the precious people. And when you connect those guys together to have a bigger voice, it's a beautiful thing. And that's basically what our networks do. So, what I just want to share is some of the stories from Kampala in Uganda, as Robby has asked me to do. But let me just give you a little insight into these networks. First of all, we connect these groups together. We give them the mutual knowledge and understanding of each other. And those references live on for many years because they find sources of ideas and thoughts and best practices. We then do the 4 C's. So connecting, capacity building. We raise the standards of the Christian response in all sorts of different areas. Third is collective action, because over and above what we can do individually, when we join together, there are some things we can do effectively to really have influence if we can join together in certain activities. And then the fourth is citywide influence, and that's where our influence both on the church in that country and also potentially the authorities in the cities and potentially the government, we can have a collective voice into those situations. So, how's that worked out in Kampala? Well, we've been working there for 15 years. And so, one of the first points I want to make is that you might have representation, and there we've got 180 local groups in Kampala. So, clearly we've got that advantage to work with, that we can, the network there called Crane, can go anywhere in the city authorities and say, I represent 180 groups. And that has a big first step. So collaborating clearly gives you an advantage. But you also need a track record, because it's one thing saying you represent a big bunch of people, but so what? Where is your track record? And I want to just point us towards, we have to have good work to speak about. If we go to the work they have been doing, they work with, the Crane network works with over 9,000 girls in terms of education. It works with even bigger numbers in terms of child protection. And in the areas that we gathered here for, it's slightly smaller, but they've been working consistently for the last 4 years with 20 long-stay kind of residential care homes, which we would call probably orphanages, and converted those into short-term, short-stay organisations. And in the process, they've also reintegrated nearly 1,000 kids into safe families or safe placements. And I put the emphasis there because I'm not into numbers of moving kids out. I'm into numbers of safe long-term placements. And the third area is that they've worked on family strengthening. And in the last 2 years, they've got 428 families in a mentoring program to strengthen the families. So the reason I say that, those numbers might be small or big, depending on your perspective, but it's about having credentials. If you're going to step out, you have to have some sort of track record and credentials behind you. One of the other track records they've had is that they've consistently attended government meetings or ministry meetings. And you probably know, if you've done those things, they are not necessarily fun places to go. It is hard work. They often feel a waste of time and fairly meaningless. But in attending them consistently, Crane have got known to the authorities that they are always there, they can be relied on. And as a result, over time, we are now consulted in all sorts of different situations, and we're very often Crane is the first people that the authorities will contact when they need help. And that, you don't get that easily. You have to work at it through that consistent track record approach. So that would be one of my first kind of points, track record. Now, what has that enabled? Well, I don't know if you know Kampala, but they quite regularly decide to clear the streets of street children, and it used to be that they just put them in jail. Whereas now, they will talk to groups like Crane and others about in advance of what they're going to do, and they will allow suggestions of alternatives of how these kids can be alternatives to jail, which at least gives us the chance to have input into the process and into the actions. In terms of legal things, and I'm sure this has happened in many places, you have input into changing laws and regulations, and certainly in terms of Crane, they had consistent input into the alternative care framework that became law in 2017 and into the changes in the Children's Act. And those things, once you get into the regular process, you can take a valid part in shaping some of the changes in the laws. One of the other things that they've done is that there's a national helpline, as there are in many places, and Crane is one of the quickest and often the first place that national helpline will refer kids to in cases of abuse, because they have earned the reputation of consistently responding well to those requests. They've also been able and welcomed into all sorts of the training, which again, many of you will probably be also involved with, is in order to ease the system or oil the system of the reintegrations. They've got involved into training the government social workers, the parole officers, the police, and even the judicial system. And particularly because we're very involved in the child protection, the relationships with the judicial system and training the judges has been very much part of the work that the network's been done. It helps that the head of the justice system is a Christian, and he committed 2 years ago to make sure that abusers were given the maximum sentence in every case that could be tried. Since then, the network's been involved in putting children's rooms into some of the police stations. They put children's rooms into the courthouses. They've petitioned for video evidence from children. They've got anatomical dolls in order that the children can point out where they were touched or abused. And all those things have been plugging away over the last 3 years. And just to give an example, there was a case that the network is supportive of a girl who was abused at the age of 2. And on the 7th of October this month, the abuser was given a 30-year life sentence. So it shows that the judge kept his promise so that it becomes a deterrent to stop abusers thinking they can get away with it. Okay, I'll just give one more example, which was actually from India, because there the government is kind of anti-Christian in some respects. And one of the things we've learned is one of the actions we've done is to major on child protection, particularly in schools and government schools. And that has given us the right to, well, number one, it gets a big impact because we're working with a large number of kids and into government schools, and that stops us being labelled as potentially only working with Christians. That's also built the relationship with the child protection officers and the officials who we invite to be part of those trainings. And that also, when we then spin over into helping the residential programs to improve their qualities, we're still able to gain favour with the officials that we've known through the child protection to help us in raising the standards in residential homes rather than just closing them down. And so again, earning the right and the relationship is a really important thing, even when the officials are supposedly, potentially causing you trouble. So, just to wrap up, the learnings that I've come, if I was to conclude, and I can actually put those on the screen. Do you want to put those on the screen? and you can read for yourselves. Sorry. So my first point was about earning the reputation through your track record. Hopefully this will work. Building the relationships with the right people. And again, because we've got a lot of churches in the network, a lot of the Christians who are in authorities or are in government may well go to one of our churches. And therefore, working through the network of Christians in the churches, you can find out the right people who we should be talking to and connect and find roots in to who are the decision makers that we really need to be talking to. And the third part is taking hold of those opportunities that are presented and making sure we do a good job to really maximize our reputation and ensure that they come back to us repeatedly and know that we will do a good job. And hopefully through that, the reputation of your work or your collaboration and the church will actually be raised up as being a good place to come to. It's a reliable place to come to, and they know they get a good job done. By all means, feast on those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So basically what we're going to do today is have 3 people speak quickly, and then after that we will spend the time with a Q&A session. Okay? I'd like to ask Richard to join us now to give us a different experience from Europe this time.
Thank you. I could have asked Brian to leave his points up on there because they're also my points, but maybe with a slightly different angle on it. Oh, thanks for moving my notes away from me. Anytime. So I, as you may have heard this morning, I'm the lead coordinator for the European facilitation team, but I'm also involved in the United Kingdom with Home for Good, which Phil Green spoke about this morning. And in preparing for this, I've actually spoken to Emily Christou, who is the head of advocacy for Home for Good. And so much of the stories that I will tell and the points are from Emily as much from myself. I also, third point in terms of experience, I chair and previously led the Home for Good activity in my own county, in our own region of the UK. And so the connections there are with local government, whereas Home for Good's connections at the national level are with national government. So some ways, not new points to what Brian has said, but different illustrations. And many of them come from Emily. And when I spoke to Emily in preparation for this, her final words to me before we finished the call was to say, please will you just be sure to make sure that you say and tell everyone it's not rocket science. It really is just about building good relationships with people. There just happen to be people who've got positions of authority. So therefore it's not something to be scared of. So the first point is around being good at what you do, which ties into your first point. When Home for Good first started up, it was very much about encouraging Christians to step forward, to foster and to adopt. And they did that well. And there are many Christians stepped forward to offer to take children into their own homes. We had some great stories of particular cities. The first one was Southampton on the south coast of the United Kingdom, where they locally had built up a relationship with their local authority and had promised that they would find 40 homes. And after 1 year, they'd got to about 73. So they were able to sort of tell this story, and that immediately gained confidence in what they were doing. And so when this goes on after a while, you find that whenever you speak to somebody in local government, let's say, and when I, in my area of Worcestershire, talk to local fostering service managers and heads of children's services, and you say, oh yes, I'm from Home for Good, they'd already heard through other people in different areas who we were and that we were a good organisation. And it just created an open door so that we could have good conversations. Sometimes it is often the opportunities that come from the people that you know. So it just so happens that the Prime Minister of Great Britain has a faith advisor. It's one of the regular posts to advise them on the different faiths. Mr. Johnson has one of those, yes. So Home for Good got to know the faith advisor when it was one of the past 3 Prime Ministers. David Cameron, I think, so 2 Prime Ministers ago. It just happens that the faith advisor to the Prime Minister is a Christian. You would expect them to be of some faith, and they were a Christian. And somebody in the Home for Good office knew them personally. So as a result of that, they got an open door to speak to the Prime Minister's advisors just on the basis of a personal relationship. So you never know who you have in your organisation, or just through a friendship, who knows somebody who might be in that position to be able to influence. And it creates opportunity. One of my stories was in our local area, we went to launch Home for Good. And we did that through a service of worship in the cathedral in our city. And we filled the cathedral with people. And we invited city leaders, leaders from the local authority to come and be part of that service. And the fostering services manager said, well, our head of department is always good at speaking at public events. I'm sure he'll be very pleased to come and do that. I'd not met Stuart, who I now know him as, but he agreed with his manager he would turn up on a Saturday and speak for 5 minutes, just endorsing what Home for Good does on behalf of the local authority. His role was head of adoption services for the whole of our region. So I'm driving along in my car one day, and the phone rings, hands-free, and I answered the phone, and he said, oh, hello, my name's Stuart Watkins. I understand I'm coming to speak at your launch. I said, yes, that'd be really good, and I'm really pleased to speak to you, Mr. Watkins. And he said, one of the reasons that I'm really delighted to come and speak is that it was in the cathedral that I gave my life to Jesus 20 years ago. Oh, I managed to stay on the road. And we just shared each other's stories, and in the end we did an interview between the two of us in the front of the cathedral in front of lots of people there. And there was a real culture in the UK social services which was very anti-Christian, and certainly people 30 years ago, 20 years ago who were Christians and applied to be foster carers would be looked down on as people who were likely to beat their children, ostracise them if they revealed themselves as being homosexual, and would try and brainwash them into being Christians, and therefore we were dangerous people and shouldn't be put with them. So if you work in those departments and you're a Christian, you keep quiet about your faith. That's how it became. So we held this launch in the cathedral, and we invited the social workers, and several of them quietly came and sneaked in the background, and you could see them looking at each other and going, are you a Christian? Yeah, yeah. Are you a Christian? Yeah, you, and you, and you as well. And it enabled the people within the department to be able to be open about their faith. And the whole culture has changed now, so that the Christians are viewed as being the best places to place children, because we've got a great community, we have an ethos of love and forgiveness and acceptance, and suddenly across the whole of the UK, the environment has changed as this kind of relationship, two-way relationship between local authorities and local Christians working has built up. Many of you will remember in September 2015 on the global press there was a picture of a little boy called Aylan Kurdi who had been washed up, drowned on a Turkish beach, who was a refugee child, and it created a wave of compassion, albeit short-lived, across the world. The British government prepared to make a statement about this public statement. In order to do that, of course, they needed to draft in the faith advisor, whose next phone call was to Home for Good to tip them off that the government was about to make. So the point here is you have to be ready for the opportunities and agile and ready to move. And what Home for Good did was a quick conversation in the office, a social media post, and a very simple response form on their website that people could say, yes, I would be interested in considering fostering a refugee child if the opportunity came up. They thought they would get a few hundred people. That was on a Thursday evening. By Tuesday, the following week, 15,000 people had completed this form online. About a third of them were Christians, about a third of them were Muslims, and about a third of them were people of no faith. With that, they had an open door for Krish Kandia to go and into number 10 Downing Street, alongside the major children's charities, to represent Home for Good in terms of being how could we get involved in help. And following that, I believe that Krish goes about once a month as part of an advisory group to the Prime Minister about children's policies and so on. So just a little opportunity like that, because there was already the personal connection, opened up vast opportunities for the organisation. And you need to nurture these relationships. So in Worcestershire, my area, the person who followed me in leading our local movement now meets once a term with each of the relevant managers, just to keep in touch, just to talk about where they're going in order to nurture the relationships. The national team hold an annual reception in Westminster for members of Parliament and others, and we bring the fostering and adoption community from Home for Good from around the country together, and we do some awards and we do some presentations. It's just about keeping who we are in the minds of the people there. So, final story, I'm not sure how I'm doing for time. Okay, I'll start to wind up. Again, another personal connection with a black MP whose history was working with young people on the streets and who was a Christian and was passionate about the fact that a much higher percentage of black boys fail to be placed when they need an adoptive or foster family, particularly adoptive family, than white children in our country. That gave them an open, because of that subject and because of the relationship that already existed, we were able to get to the fore in the political world this particular issue. And so only last week a national campaign was launched to encourage people to step forward to be willing to adopt black boys, because they're one of the most vulnerable communities within our country. So, it's about relationships, about getting to know people, taking advantage of those little leads that you get, and then nurturing those relationships, and you never know what will happen. And we can talk about that locally. Again, Joy, who's replaced me at leading the Home for Good group, is now on an advisory group about children's policy for the whole of our region, with the senior politician in our region in charge of that, because he'd heard of Home for Good and the reputation and felt that we should have a seat at the table. Because underlying all of that, and the key point is, whatever you're doing, do it well, because it opens doors. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Richard. So, has it been helpful so far, despite the wonderful lunch that we had? So, you all good? So I'm taking the last portion here, and what I'd like to do is talk to you about what has happened in the Philippines. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to give one small example and one bigger example. You're going to hear me talk about the bigger example a little more on Saturday, but I want to provide a few details here because this is the time for you guys to ask how. So the first example I want to give you is some work that we did with an institution, a government orphanage in the Philippines. So to let you know, our government is very corrupt to begin with. So we started working with a boys' home that added girls, that added elderly people, that added street people. And they were all together, all 1,000 of them. Yes, so can you imagine the kind of chaos that comes with that, right? So there was chaos that was happening there, and then we come in, start helping, we start getting into trouble because there was one person there who was a staunch Catholic, like a house parent, found out we were Christians, did not take that very well at all, and started taking us down. So what I'm going to share with you is what happened when we were called into the principal's office. Okay, so that's exactly what happened in the meeting. I was called in because they knew that I was the face, I was the figurehead, but I had a couple of other groups with me. But before I talk about the trouble, I want to show you how it ended first. So this is how it is. Help. So anyway, while we're waiting for the technology to work out, some of the issues that we had to, and I'm not naming the name of the organization because obviously I allowed myself to be videotaped. So let's just keep it neutral. But even the government employees were sexually abusing the street children, the boys, the girls, the single women who were with the boys who were with the gay men, and in dark places in that building, and so on and so forth. This is how it ended, though, because of church and government collaboration that we put together. Number one, we were able to feed, we'll give 6,000. Ha! At least I'm waking you up, and at least I'd know if you're paying attention or not, right? Because people are calling my attention every so often, telling me it's not working out well. Can you guys at the back see this? Yeah? Okay. So without us asking, we provided 6,000 meals in 1 year. We spent almost nothing for that in that home of 1,000 people. Whether corporately or personal, it didn't really affect us. And we learned a very effective awareness campaign here. So we had this friend of mine whose mom started badgering me, saying, I want to feed elderly people. And I said, I am not the right organization for that. And she kept badgering and badgering and badgering. And I said no until my daughter, my adopted daughter, told me, Dad, didn't you teach me that an orphan is anyone who does not have at least one committed person? And she said these 400 elderly people were abandoned by their own families. And I found the stories. It was an 80-year-old grandmother whose family brought her to the mall and told her, Granny, just hold on for a bit, and they never showed up again. Yeah, those are the kinds of stories of these ladies. Okay, it was a really, really nasty story. So when my daughter talked to me about this, I said, what do I do now? Right? And I decided, the Lord spoke to me, and He told me, just go ahead. Out of the 1,000 people, 400 were elderly there. Nasty situation. I'd see 80-year-old, never mind, grandmothers that were, I saw things we were not supposed to see while I was touring people. And basically, what happened there was that those women were so touched by what happened, by what they saw, that they started inviting their friends who invited their friends who invited their friends. So from feeding grandmothers, people now knew who PWO was in the business community, in the church community, even in the agnostic community, the gay community. People started getting to know us, and people started coming. And people started bringing food, clothing, and all these different things. And after a while, at some point, just for this place, we started getting 60 volunteers. Okay? So what we learned was by doing this, we had a nice awareness campaign going on. There were thousands of other material needs provided. The children were locked up at night. They had no beds, nothing. It was either concrete or you figure out how to sleep on somebody. That was it. So the needs the material provision just started coming to the point that we did not have the capability to distribute what was being given to us weekly anymore. My living room was filled with big boxes already. And then suicide prevention. We had this special needs child that tried to jump off the building from outside the bars because they were locked inside there. So we were seen by the orphanage director as the only guys that have the capability to do stuff like that. So it was happening while we were teaching a martial arts class down on the road. The other result that we had, and I'll show you the picture after, is we had several sectors around that were able to work together to make these different things happen. We got the gospel shared to hundreds of children. Sports ministries came in, Bible studies, counseling, prayer meetings, retreats, and so on and so forth. We gained 60 volunteers, and at the end of it, in 1 year, this all happened in 1 year, we had at least 30 adoptees from there. Most of them were aged out. So there were 17 that were aged out. There were 7 that were special needs, and the others were children. So 20-something of them were all, I guess, had desperate needs because some of them were literally like tortured and hit with paddles and stuff like that. So we got those kids out. Now the big question is how did that happen, right? How did we get the church and government to work to make this happen? And I decided to illustrate it quite a bit. I'll show you the profile first. I hope I can point it from here. So anyway, if you notice here on the left, this guy's a foster care advocate, pastor. So this is the profile first, okay? Then I'll talk about how we work together. So church pastors, nonprofit, that's 2 people from my group, a businesswoman, government people, a nonprofit children's home, and 2 social workers. Why did we end up together this way? So here's the story. This is the principal's office story. Okay, that small guy there, tagged as government, he's the director of those, or he got fired. He was the director of the 1,000-person institution. And he talked to me and he said, I have realized that you guys are doing a lot here in our institution, and I need you to come over and I need you to bring your guys along because I need to talk to you. And when we showed up there, basically he told us, I have heard that you have been attempting to convert our children. And we had to start explaining ourselves there, right? And basically what happened was, at the end of it, when he found out what we had done there with the different groups, he went back to the lady and he had the lady called and scolded her in front of me and said, don't you ever touch this guy again or anything that he does here. Okay, that's what happened, and that's how we got the 30 kids out. So, anybody curious with how we made that work? Yeah? Okay, so when I knew that we were going to go to the principal's office, I tried to gather my facts first. I wanted to find out what we did first so that we could come with one big story. And then I made sure that I talked to every other person that was in this group so that we showed up with one big story. Now, when he talked to us about the conversions, let's see if I can. This is what I did. Number 1, I followed the exact same principles that that WWO was espousing a couple years back. The first thing I did is to create a common agenda between the practitioners in the back end. And then on the front end, I was talking to this government guy whose main agenda was to make sure that we did not convert anyone. Okay, I got that as inside information. That's how it started. I wanted to know, why are you having us called? And I found out it was because of the conversions issue, right? So I made sure that my agenda with this government guy was to help him make sure that there were no conversions. Believe it or not, we got that done. You know why? The pastor told me, yeah, we're definitely not going to do any conversions. Because that's not our job, that's the Holy Spirit's job. Right? So we show up there, and I have a pre-meeting with everyone and say, guys, let's make sure that, number 1, our agenda is to get the kids out of here. Number 2, to make sure that we bring ourselves in favor by showing them what we can do collectively. So I showed them PWO, Philippines Without Orphans, can bring all of this to the table if you're willing to allow us to serve you. We don't want anything in return. So first he shows up and says, I don't want you converting anyone. We're like, no problem, sir. And they're like, yeah, but you have a pastor here. I was like, yeah, pastor. Are you going to do any conversions? He's like, no. Right? And he just looks at me and winks. Right? This is the same place where we had the retreats. In that institution until they allowed us to take the kids outside of the institution. But we never converted anyone. And they were happy with that. They agreed to it. Right? So when I showed up there telling them, we can help you get the kids fostered, get the kids adopted, you lack food to give to the kids, we can help you find that food. We can help you find the clothes, the blankets. We can help you find those things. We can't do it, but we know people who do. Suddenly, that guy just elevated me. He's like, nobody touches him. And that's why. And the only reason why we got to adopt was because the church guys, this guy, the slightly bigger guy beside the lady in the red shirt, he took 17 age outs at the end of this story. He was supposed to be the first that was going to get kicked out in this entire story. And the reason why he could not get kicked out was because the director said, do not mess with anybody that Rob set up there because they're feeding everyone. They're giving everything to everyone. So what I'm saying is we made sure we became an indispensable asset and basically told them, let's get the kids out. And then I said, we're going to focus on strengths. What are you willing to do? I didn't tell them what to do. I asked them what I could do, and I told them, I'm going around to ask everyone what they can do, and then I will go back to you and tell you how it can look like if we have a united response. And that's what we did. And I guess to close out this story, the reason why we got 30 out was because when they found out that we were willing to take kids, one day somebody just called me up and said, we've got 40 age outs, we don't want them, can you take them tomorrow? That was it, right? So they wanted to throw the kids out. The reason why we got 30 is because they realized, hold on, there's nobody that's going to do the housework. So they literally kept 10. It was heartbreaking, but I was able to get the other 30, right? Because that's what they were willing to give. But that's why, because they saw that every time they asked for something, or every time we said we could do something, we could actually pull a rabbit out of a hat until they got used to it. Now, it wasn't my capability. It's just that everyone was talking in the background, and we were willing to fire shots all at the same time at them. Okay, so that's a smaller example. The bigger example that I would like to give is this one. I'm actually talking about this on Saturday, but maybe to give you guys the finished product, I'm working with the two people on the right now. They started a local organization in the Philippines right around the same time that I started Philippines Without Orphans, which was only 3.5 years ago. And at this point, I'd say that the engagement that we have, talk about church and government, we have a contract with the national military to train every single man and woman in uniformed personnel on fatherhood. Same thing with our Philippine National Police. We have a national contract as well. And we're beginning to involve their wives, the families, and so on and so forth. There are additional trainings on how to take care of your family. They've actually asked me about trauma. They're like, you're the orphan guy. Do you know about trauma? Maybe you can teach us about trauma. So I'm beginning to see these things move. And as of now, we've moved to other countries as well, 10 Asian countries. And spoiler alert for Saturday, we've trained around 2 million parents so far in the last 2 years or so. And I did not expect that, right? And the story behind this is it started with these two guys and myself just talking, and then it turned into a board where the second guy, Bishop Noel, 3 years ago, handled around 33,000 churches in the Philippines in his umbrella organization. I just talked to him a few weeks ago, and he told me, Rob, it's now up to 130,000 or something like that. He's like, let me know how you want to mobilize them. So can you imagine what I've been thinking of lately, right? And what I've been trying to figure out. But the Lord did that. And I wanted to share this because I was surprised with how we ended up getting national contracts. I did not explain that. And aside from the national contracts, it gave birth to a national initiative for us where we are going around the country to train pastors, especially grassroots pastors, on fatherhood as well. And to put things into perspective, the Philippines has 7,107 islands. So if you want to go around and train grassroots pastors, it's not going to be easy. But it's happening. We have people going up the mountains, taking 3 to 4 day hikes after going on a plane and a boat. And, it's beginning to happen. And aside from that, so far we've gotten the gospel across through children's books to 20,000 kids from hard places. As of the moment, I'm working on 100,000 more. It's grown to Indonesia, where they're starting off with 50,000 on Muslim kids. So the big question is, how did that happen? To summarize that very quickly, we went to the church first. And given the caliber of the people here, if you look at it, so you have the 100-something, so you have a U.S. ambassador, the 100-something thousand church guy. The next guy is a mega church pastor. He runs one of the largest mega churches in the Philippines. And then the guy on the right has the largest petroleum company or independent petroleum company in the Philippines. So we said, okay, let's start small. And that starting small was 100 churches. We gathered 100 churches together and we started serving them on fatherhood. And we learned something. They started saying first, we want more. So we gave them 10 more different types of training. And then they're asking for more. And at some point they said, if you're giving us all these things, what are you going to ask in return? That was the response we got. I talked to them about adoption. They weren't really interested. And somewhere along the way, God threw a curveball. And somebody said, hey, I know somebody in the military. And it started going that route. And they were very responsive. And both our military and our police are now doing internal cleansing and values formation. And that's where we ended up. So how did we do that? We just moved with the Lord and we talked to people. And basically what happened there, so I'll skip this. We made sure we were an indispensable asset. They said, we need training. We're like, well, we've got fatherhood. We've also got the corporate stuff. And then we made sure, this was very important, we made sure that our types of advocates, so WWO says there are 3 types of advocates: influencers, champions, and practitioners. I added volunteers because they're useful every so often, especially as band-aids. They happily make themselves band-aids in certain situations. Make sure that you have the right kind of person talking to whoever you're working with. For example, when I have board meetings, I will not bring, and that's not a career path, by the way, the influencer, champion, and practitioner portion. It's not an upward ladder, okay? It depends on where the Lord has called you. But if you're going to talk to an influencer, make sure you bring an influencer. That's because they speak a different language. And lastly, keep your eyes open for God's unexpected movement. If you're trusting the Lord to move, like with us, we were expecting the church to respond. We did not get the result we wanted, but God opened the door for military. And we were like, Lord, why military? And I was asking myself, I want to end orphan care. Why am I with the military and the police? Right? And the Lord answered it. He said, because to do that, I found out from research throughout history, to create any type of change, it doesn't matter what change you want to create, you have to change a culture. And then the Lord started showing me, if you change the military, you change the police, you change the pastors, you change all these people using other people's resources, right? PWO, Philippines Without Orphans, is not spending its own money. It's just setting things up and aligning everything. If that happens, a culture will change. Do you agree? So I realized I was not wasting my time. Right? That's what I saw. So I I will keep it at that so that we can have more time for Q&A, if that works for you guys. Is that okay? Yeah? Okay, so yes, we have our first question right here. So Brian and Richard, get ready. You can address it to any of us or just as a generic question. Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And just to add to that, the key question that we intentionally wanted to answer was, what's in it for me? I'm the government guy. What's in it for me? Because that's usually the question that they have.
The first question is for your recording. This is a program relationship that you build with the government.
Yeah.
It seems like the second level that you begin to have the opportunity to do, because you have built the relationship, is now you can talk to them about not so much the laws of the state, but the procedural rules of the program, of how they are handling children. So the rules that they have within their office, within their department, within their division, you can then become like a consultant to them, correct?
Yes, but to make sure I'm clear about that, we were always a step away from getting banned. Because, for example, there was abuse there, like children getting tortured and stuff like that. If we got ourselves into that, they would ban us from entering, and we would never be able to work with the kids again. So it's kind of a pick your poison situation where we let them do their thing, but we also offer many different things that will make their lives easier.
But you're building a relationship which then they may invite you into that conversation.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and then is it possible that some of the people that are on your team find themselves being hired into the government to work within that department that serves children? Is that a realistic scenario that might happen over time?
No, for the Philippines, I wouldn't say it would be realistic because our government people want to keep their jobs and want to make sure that they don't do. Well, I don't want to speak. I'll speak generally because we're being recorded, but they generally. I've been around the country, 82 provinces. Many of them have talked to me and said, we want to make sure that we go to work and do not do any work. Because if we have any projects, when the tides shift, they have bullets to take. So we want you to help us. We want you to do our work, but we don't really want to work ourselves. So they allowed us to do work. And that's how we were able to maneuver it. So it's a keen understanding of the practical functioning of my government. What I did not do was pick a fight, because everybody else who picked a fight and tried to change the government lost access. Right? So I had to pick my poison of, okay, there are children getting tortured here, but at the same time, they're letting me in and they're telling me do what I want to do. So I was able to do that. I pulled out the 30 kids because of that. If I picked a fight instead, it would have been the end of me. The 30 kids would have stayed there and everyone else still would have gotten tortured anyway. Did I answer your question?
Can I pick up on it's slightly oblique, and clearly our understanding of your situation is very surface from what you've just said. But in our context, picking up about the kind of influence we have, one of the points that I discussed with Emily when we spoke is to remember that we are the experts. You might not quite understand what I mean by that. And I don't know what it's like in your country, but in the UK, most politicians and indeed most civil servants, administrators, are in the job for 2 years maybe, 3 years maybe at most, and then they move on to their next job. So they may learn rapidly and become a bit of an expert in the topic, but they don't have the 20 years experience or the 10 years experience, and they don't have on the ground level experience of what really works. So we can be confident when we're speaking to people, when we have these relationships that are built, that we know more about it than they do. And they know that. So in one example in the UK, they asked for advice about a particular topic. I can't remember what it was, to be honest, but they asked for advice about a particular topic. And what Emily did was write a draft policy for that topic. And she said everybody on the team was saying, you can't do that. They've asked for advice, not a policy. And she kind of said, well, trust me. So she said, in our advice is that this is what the policy should look like. A policy was published later on, which was the official policy of the UK government. Guess what was in it, word for word? So it's around getting those positions of influence. If we got the relationship, we can build on that, and the level we get is amazing.
Exactly, and just to piggyback on that quickly as well, I can't highlight the fact that you need to know what they really want, not what they tell you they want. Like the orphanage will tell you, oh, we want clothes. Find out what they really want. For the military, it was the same, to the point that we got inside information from the majors and the generals telling us, we have blocked the church. We have blocked the church. We have made sure that the church will not get into the military or the police. They gave us that insight because we had that relationship. And they asked us, we asked them why. You know what they said? Because they view us as numbers to convert. As numbers to convert. And I got asked, are you a Christian? I said, yes, I am. I said, but this is a non-sectarian organization and all we really want to do is help. So tell us what limitations you want. We're okay with that. We just want to serve you. And that's where they let it go. And what happened was the material we had, just so you know where it is at this point, we taught a one-day seminar and then they blocked the church, but they needed facilitators. So we said, hey, I'm sorry, but all we've got is this mega church. We've got trained facilitators from there. And then they said, okay, but no conversions, just facilitation. Well, the books just happened to have Bible verses in every page, and they had to be discussed, and it just happened to be facilitated by Christians. And at some point, they said, this is working out so well, we want our men in uniform, our squad leaders, to do it. So we said, you know what, we can train your squad leaders, and then we can back off. But the church already had discipleship relationships. There were discipleship groups per squad. And then the military heads came in and the police heads as well. And they started teaching it. And then they started sending us emails. You know what they were saying? I'm realizing that I have to straighten out my life because my squad will no longer respect me in our survival situations. So I have now gone back to my wife. I am no longer cheating on her. And so on and so forth. And it is now happening wherever we start teaching this fatherhood movement, and it's changing. And that's all because we listened to them and what their issue was, where the church viewed them as numbers. I see you.
I mean, as a layman, you've been, from my side, you've been talking more on this fatherhood teaching or moment, whatever it is. Yeah. Can you give a fair outline of what it is if I have not got it before?
Sure.
And the second part of my question is that to our brother there, you spoke about India and the current situation in India. So when you were talking about the organization that you represent or WWO as a
the organization Viva.
Viva, yeah. So would you mind elaborating as to what system is in place that you have been handling so that others can catch up and collaborate? Yeah.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
I'll answer the first question and pass the mic to you, Brian. Okay, so to your first question, what is that fatherhood movement? The ambassador that I showed you earlier wrote a US best-selling book called Be a Better Dad Today. Be a Better Dad Today. So we took the book, it had a workbook, we said, hey, we're willing to do this training. If you want to do your values formation, we'll do it for free. Just bring your people, feed everybody. We're going to take care of the training and everything that comes with that. That was one. The other one I did, which was specifically for the pastors, was from a South American guy named Cassie Karstens. His book is called The World Needs a Father, and it primarily addresses father wounds. Like my wounds from my father, and then now that I'm a father, I'm inflicting wounds on my children. So that's what that book addresses. But for the military, what we used was the one of the ambassador, which is broken down into 2 parts only. Number 1, you must have a family vision. And number 2, here are the 10 tools that you can use to be a better father. So that was it. It was easy enough for everyone. And at the end of the day, we'd have this exercise where these military guys would be writing down their vision for the family so that they could share it and realign it with their family. There.
So, as we all know, child protection there's been a wave of people, all of us having to raise the bar in terms of child protection, and there's lots of guidance on it. But very often it's kind of easy at high level and head office level, but it's really difficult when you get down to kind of grassroots level. And one of the things that Viva's gained a reputation of, because we work with the kind of one-man kind of churches or the very small organizations, is how to convert some of that child protection language to something that can be implemented and understood, if only in principle and in a code of conduct, even if they can't get round to writing a child protection policy. But, you know, that is still our goal. And so in each of our networks, we try and help, you know, the Christian church to have understanding and have to, always to have a code of conduct, but in wherever we can to have a child protection policy as well. And so in India, that was our intention through the networks. But as I said before, we've spread that into schools, because again, there's not a lot of knowledge or experience of implementing child protection in schools. And so that was, we applied exactly the same trainings that we do within the local churches, but into schools. And that's been remarkable. You know, it's been kind of like a snowball effect. And I must say, Vincent here is the network coordinator of the Hyderabad network. So he leads the work in Hyderabad with a partner network to Viva. So if you've got questions on India, please talk to Vincent. But equally so, we have I don't know if we also have this, what we call a quality improvement system, which we apply not only to churches but to orphanages as well, in terms of raising the standards. And that looks at different things, not only child protection but financial accountability, program design, child well-being, staff care, things like that. So again, we're looking wherever we work, both in any form of church or Christian project, to raise the standards. So those are our two programs, child protection and quality improvement. But do talk to Vincent.
Thanks, Brian. So I know we have a question from over there at the back. Madam.
She'll talk to you afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
I had no idea that this would even come up when I came in here today, but I'm actually the CEO of a U.S. defense contract company, and I just got on a contract last week to provide wellness training for our troops, and next week I have to present to the Department of Defense a plan for training our military.
Any ideas where she might get that from, Robert?
And also, I'm on the board of this NGO in Serbia, and I'm friends with the commander of the chaplaincy corps in Serbia, and he has asked me what they can do to improve families, what the military can do to improve families in Serbia. So I just need to talk to you. We need to talk.
Yes, definitely. Just
I'm
to throw,
shaking back here.
I'm getting goosebumps. Just to throw a little bone your way, we don't just have fatherhood. The ambassador's wife wrote "Be the Best Wife That You Can Be." They have a marriage book, and they have what's called the 7 Fs, which is basically how to run your family. So it's got all of that. They're all in books. So we just happened to do fatherhood first because it was the most popular book, right? So yeah, we can do that. See how the Lord works? Military. Hey, now we have a proof of concept, right? You can talk about the Philippines. We have data to back it up. And we have high-level people as well, right? We have the petroleum guy and then the ambassador and whatever else I've done in the Philippines. We can all get on the phone and talk to whoever you want to talk to. So, yeah, so
7 days to put together.
there you go.
plan,
So to let you know, yeah, we can talk today. A lot of the work with the ambassador is C-level work. So basically, everyone that runs something there, like myself, has to be a CEO, and not just some CEO that just got some title. Like I've worked with over 30 countries. You have to be at a certain point to do that. And because of that, I can bring in people who can talk to C-level people on your end as well, aside from myself. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Maybe it's not a question, but maybe if someone here, maybe not just you, but about countries like China and North Korea, where we have law about religion. For example, cannot preach children 0 to 18 years old. So I don't know if you have anything on that.
The fatherhood thing, because it's been packaged as non-sectarian, is the first Christian book to be published in Mandarin. It is. We are already in China, and we do have the blessing of the Chinese government. So yeah, I mean there are Bible verses, but it's a non-sectarian book, right? But it's filled with the Bible stuff. So yes, you can get it in, and we packaged it as non-sectarian with. In Mandarin, I can figure out how to get that for you. Let's talk after. The English copy I can get as well. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, we can get you a soft copy online. We can check that, so you at least get to see what's in it. Yeah, and there's like trainer certification for it and stuff. So that's how I got my inroads with the military. I ended up training the generals, believe it or not, which I found out on the day itself that it was the generals and their, so basically the top 5 of each group. So generals and 4 down that we ended up training. Yeah. So anybody have input on that? So that's my answer to the China thing. North Korea, I don't have an answer, but China, it's already there. So if you want it, we can get something going in China. Yeah. Any other questions? The silence here can mean 2 things, right? We have bored you to death, or you're thinking, I'm not sure which one it is. So
Just be careful. I kept on seeing a lady over here go to brush her hair, and I nearly gave her the microphone. So,
anyone else have questions or comments? Be a better dad today. Gregory Slayton. Cassie, Cassie. Oh, you found him? Yeah, he's a good guy. Nobody else has questions. Stand by. I know, right? Oh my gosh. Amazing that you have 7 days to provide your proof of concept.
So there's a parallel to the government role in this, and that is, what has the media found out about you? And what are they saying about, if they have, what are they saying about your relationship to the government?
Well, they support us because we now have PR releases. So we come out on TV, radio. We use different kinds of media. Magazines write about us. And normally, at least what we've seen with media is people will position it the way they want to position it. Right? They interview you, but they say what they want to say and point it in any way that they want to point it. If I can say this, the hot water that I've been in is more along the LGBT side, where they ask us, they know we're family people, right? So the LGBT folks just have to come out and ask the question of what about us? And that's the one that we've been more careful about. But generally the media's had good things to say because everybody agrees that the military and the police need character in our country. No one's going to disagree with it, right, brother? There's another Filipino over there, so he knows what I'm talking about. Yeah. You're welcome.
I'm just conscious that we're at the front because we're invited to be at the front, not because we're the only experts here. And I know, Marina's worked with the Croatian government leaders, and there must be other people as well with expertise. If you have any thoughts, input of your own that add to what we've said, they would be more than welcome.
Yes, I just saw Anita as well. I shouldn't be the one talking, it should be Anita. Yeah, so I'm not here to give a monologue, guys.
Praise God. Yes, Enoch. I come from Burundi. You have seen a little video over there. About working with government, the little thing I know is to ask government, what can we help? What can we do for you? Where do you have a problem on behalf of children, vulnerable, and the widow, because it's a package. From there, they started to say what they want to see happening. They started to say the changes they want to occur, to happen. That's what we did in Burundi 2016. Before I come here, government support me to come here, give some money for my air ticket. I told them I got an invitation to attend the World Without Orphans conference in Thailand. I have been traveling in East Africa, other places. I never came to you, but this time, this is huge. I cannot make it. If you are happy for what I'm going to do there, please help me. That's how they paid the ticket for me. And when I leave this place, I reported what happened here, because they gave, of course, the money. And I said, now we have to mobilize communities. We have to tell people in our country how the situation is. According to the statistic, millions of children. Some are in orphanages, including Burundi. And the statistic of Burundi, because we have over 800,000 orphans and vulnerable children. And I say, so we have to tell people what they can do, because it is not a national problem, it's a local problem. And they support me, gas oil, to travel around the country. And when we're organizing the national conference or regional conference talking about the children, we invited them. Can you come to tell all these people who are here, what do you want? Of course, we know what to do as a Christian, as a church, but we want to hear more from you. What do you have in your plan? And they come and they speak their plan, and we continue to empower people, to teach people to follow government program and embracing this heart of God for taking care widow, orphans, and the vulnerable. Through passing in that way, we are seeing God working, even if it's a challenge. So you can ask a government, what do you want us to help you, to do for you? When they say that, when you say that, you will hear from them. When you will be doing that, we will reach where we are going. That's what I may say. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good input. That's a common factor across different countries, by the way. When you ask and you get an answer, then you find out what they really need. That's a way to open a door. They usually don't respond if you talk about what your advocacy is and what you want to do. Yeah.
Sure, I'm Roberts from India, working in Andhra Pradesh. I worked as a project director in government service for 25 years. Because when we are discussing about this ICPS, Integrated Child Protection Scheme, there are many laws and policies are there. I used to conduct several meetings with the non-governmental organization representatives to explain, to make them aware of the policies and all. Because many NGOs, non-governmental organizations, they attend for the meetings. But some of the people, and that means Christians, who are running orphanages, they never come forward to know about this for the meetings. Because what happened, I'll give you an example. In Andhra Pradesh, near Vijayagaram, there are huge Bible colleges there. It was running by a famous evangelist, and 100 girls used to stay in that college. So his son also, working along with this guy, made a mistake. It's not a mistake. He made a he raped some of the girls that were there. The small girls from 12 years to 20 years. So this news has come into the paper, and there was big agitation against this guy. Approached the district collector to solve this problem. So at that time I was project director and I am the concerned officer. So collector given me instructions to go and inquire about the institute. I went there, conducted a meeting, inquired about the facts, even with the police people also. We are telling about, in our area it's called police, not me. So all facts with evidence are recorded, submitted to the government, and they have given me instructions to seize the Bible College. So at that time I went there, I asked the person, do you have any registration certificate? He said no. At least do you have any licensing act recognition? He doesn't have any. Have you ever attended for the meeting which I conducted in the collectorate? He said no. Because he is not aware of the policies, what is happening, what is going on. Even he is not interested to know about these things. So it was seized like for 1 year. And finally, but he did one good thing. He used to conduct some blood donation camps and all. Approached the governor, state governor. Again, there was another inquiry about this. So finally, the government also considered, but still the case is going on in the court. It is still pending. So finally, recently the institute opened, but not the evangelistic activities are not going on. Just only blood camps are going on. After this incident, there is an incident also happened in some Saluri area, tribal area. There one pastor used to run a orphanage. There also some children were abused. That also came into paper. Again, that also ceased. Why I am telling all these things is some of the Christian organization people, they never know about the government policies. They never not interested to know about this. So that's why it is happening like that in some areas. So I am not blaming all the in our area. This was the bad experience which I faced when I was in government.
I'm coming from Zambia, and I think you heard in the morning that what Simon had said and shared, what we are doing in collaborating together with government. And I'm one of the advisors to the President of the Republic of Zambia. And what we have done is that we have actually been so close to the government to advise the president. What happens is that most of the time, government will be on the other side and the church will be the other side. So we fight. And because of that, the government does not trust the church, because most of the time the church will be fighting government. But when we befriend them, when we go closer to them, we are able to advise them. And when we advise them, they will pick, because we are not enemies. So what we have done in our country today, we have managed to advise our president to declare every 18th of October that the whole country must be fasting. And just on the 18th, that was last week on Friday, the whole nation was fasting. And we have advised the president also to create a ministry, that is the Ministry of National Guidance and Religious Affairs. It means that this ministry plays a big role. Anything from the church, anything to talk about church, this ministry advises the president. And us also, we are found in State House because every Tuesday, Wednesdays, Friday, and Saturdays, we are in State House from 05 to 7 hours to pray. So the president has opened State House for prayers. And every Sunday afternoon, there are prayers going on in State House. And because of that, it has helped us to have an upper hand, whatever we want. So in the past few years, there was a problem in our country, especially when you talk about fostering and adoption. So the process was too long, but we have managed to work so hard so that working with the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services, we have now managed to reduce the process. And we have made the government to work with us because this problem of children, they have also realized that it is a time bomb. Because right now we are talking of 23,000 children who are in the facilities and those who are street kids. So the government have seen that they need also to do something. So we have also taken a solution to them. And also what they have done, they have embraced what we have taken to them. So what is happening right now, government has come in to work with us, the NGOs and organizations that are working so hard so that we speed up that children must go out of the orphanages. And this is the process that is going on now, that every child must move now from orphanages to go into families. And government is full-time now involved. And what is going on right now, they have now also enshrined what they are talking about, emergency foster to care, foster to adopt. So it's now government that is working with the church and working with organizations. So now what I've discovered is that government is very open. Government wants to see how we can sort out problems, as long as we befriend them. If we fight them,
Totally agree.
they will not accept whatever. Whether we have got a good idea, they will say, get out. That's your problem. But when we know how to approach them, they are ready to work with us. At the moment, this is what is going on in Zambia. There are a lot of other things that I didn't say what is going on. Yeah. We are working with
absolutely
we're working with the judiciary right now, who are speeding in the courts for for you to get a child. You need to go through where you have to go, and so all that the judges are with us now. We are working together with the judges, and the process has been speeded up of the children to go quickly to the families that needs to be taken.
That's amazing. So thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we have gone overtime by a couple minutes. Yeah, it's been 7 minutes of overtime now. So I think I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Thanks for your time. And maybe we can say just a quick prayer before we part ways. Would you agree? Okay, let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for the time you've allowed us to spend with each other, to have a few conversations and to learn from each other. Lord, we lift up every country, Father, that we're involved with, and even those that we are not involved with. Father, we just pray that you would unite the church and the government, open their eyes to see what you see. And Father, we pray that you move them, you move their hearts and their minds to take action and work together. Lord, we thank you for the people who are here. I pray, Father, for a special strength and passion and grace as well from you, Lord, as each of us go out there, Lord, and try to engage the church and the government and get them to work together. Lord, we love you and we do this for you. We ask that you bless this initiative. In your name we pray. Amen.